The Second Amendment is not about hunting. It is about freedom. Our founding fathers understood the dangers of a tyrannical government. They enshrined the right to keep and bear arms to ensure people could defend themselves. This right is not subject to the whims of politicians. Any attempt to restrict firearms is an assault on our liberty. The language is clear. The right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. These words are a command to preserve our freedom. The Second Amendment is a bulwark against tyranny. It is the ultimate safeguard of our liberty. The Founding Fathers were not naive idealists. They understood the inherent dangers of power. That is why they insisted on a Bill of Rights, and why the Second Amendment holds such a prominent place. Thomas Jefferson wrote, "No free man shall ever be debarred the use of arms." George Washington declared, "A free people ought to be armed and disciplined." They understood that a well-armed citizenry was the best defense against tyranny. This vision is under attack today. Gun control advocates seek to disarm law-abiding citizens. Some argue that the Second Amendment only applies to muskets, that the Founding Fathers could not have foreseen the development of modern firearms. This argument is not only absurd, it is idiotic and a dangerous misinterpretation of the Constitution. The Second Amendment does not specify any particular type of firearm. It simply states that the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. The word arms encompasses all weapons of defense and offense, from simple muskets to the most advanced firearms available today. To claim that the Second Amendment is outdated is to claim that the Constitution itself is outdated. It is to say that the fundamental principles of liberty upon which our nation was founded are no longer relevant. The Constitution is a timeless document. Its principles are as true today as they were in 1776. The right to keep and bear arms without limitation is one of those principles. The right to defend oneself is not granted by government. It is an inherent right, endowed by our Creator. It is a right that pre-exists government, a right that no government can legitimately take away. Just as a man has a right to defend his home from an intruder, so too does he have a right to defend his family, his community, and his nation from tyranny. The Second Amendment recognizes this right and ensures that the people will always have the means to exercise it. God has given us the right to life, and with that right comes the right to defend that life. To disarm the people is to leave them vulnerable, not only to criminals but to tyrants who would seek to enslave them. We must never forget that the greatest threat to liberty comes not from foreign invaders, but from our own government. The Second Amendment is our insurance policy, our guarantee that we will always have the means to resist tyranny. In Section 5, the 1934 National Firearms Act, a breach of freedom. The National Firearms Act of 1934 was the first significant federal gun control law in American history. It imposed a tax on the manufacture and transfer of certain firearms, effectively banning their possession by most citizens. This law was a clear violation of the Second Amendment, and it set a dangerous precedent for future infringements upon our rights. The government justified the NFA by claiming that it fell under the purview of the Commerce Clause, which gives Congress the power to regulate interstate commerce. However, this was a blatant misapplication of the Commerce Clause. The Second Amendment clearly states that the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. It does not say shall not be infringed unless Congress can find a way to justify it under the Commerce Clause. The NFA was a dangerous overreach of government power. It was a sign that the federal government was willing to disregard the Constitution in its pursuit of gun control. This law should be repealed, and we must remain vigilant against any further attempts to erode our Second Amendment rights. Section 6. Historical echoes when tyrants disarm. History is replete with examples of what happens when governments disarm their citizens. From Hitler's Germany to Stalin's Russia to Mao's China, the pattern is clear. Disarmament precedes tyranny. When the people are disarmed, they are helpless to resist the dictates of a totalitarian state. In Nazi Germany, the Weimar Republic's gun registration laws were used by the Nazis to confiscate firearms from Jews and other undesirables. This disarmament paved the way for the Holocaust, in which millions of innocent people were murdered by their own government. In Soviet Russia, the Bolsheviks implemented strict gun control measures after seizing power. This allowed them to solidify their control over the population and carry out the Holodomor, a man-made famine that killed millions. These are just two examples of the countless tragedies that have occurred when governments have disarmed their citizens. We must learn from history and resist any attempt to repeat these horrors in our own country. Section 7. A call to action: defend your God-given rights. The right to keep and bear arms is under attack like never before. Gun control advocates, emboldened by a compliant media and a complicit political class, are pushing for increasingly draconian restrictions on our rights. They will not rest until we are disarmed and helpless to resist their agenda. This is a fight we cannot afford to lose. The Second Amendment is the cornerstone of our liberty. If it falls, all other rights will soon follow. We must stand up and resist these attacks on our freedom. We must contact our elected officials and let them know that we will not tolerate any infringement upon our Second Amendment rights. We must educate our friends and neighbors about the importance of the right to bear arms. We must be prepared to defend our rights by any means necessary. The future of our freedom depends on it. Section 8. The slippery slope: from gun control to totalitarianism. Gun control advocates often dismiss concerns about tyranny as paranoid delusions. They claim that they only want to enact common-sense gun control measures to reduce crime and violence. They fail to understand, or perhaps they understand all too well, that gun control is not about safety. It is about control. Once the government has the power to restrict one right, it has the power to restrict all rights. The Second Amendment is not just about guns. It is about the principle of limited government. It is about drawing a line in the sand and saying to the government, thus far and no further. If we allow the government to chip away at our Second Amendment rights, it will not stop there. It will soon come for our other freedoms, such as our freedom of speech, our freedom of religion, and our right to privacy. We will find ourselves living in a society where the government controls every aspect of our lives. Section 9. Eternal vigilance: the price of liberty. The fight for liberty is never truly over. Governments have an insatiable thirst for power, and they will always be looking for ways to expand their control over the people. The only way to safeguard our freedom is through constant vigilance and a willingness to defend our rights. Thomas Jefferson famously said, "The price of liberty is eternal vigilance." These words are as true today as they were in Jefferson's time. We cannot afford to become complacent. We must always be on guard against those who would seek to disarm us and strip us of our freedom. The right to keep and bear arms is not just a right, it is a responsibility, it is a duty. It is a duty that we owe to ourselves, to our children, and to future generations. We must never take this duty lightly. We must be prepared to defend our Second Amendment rights, and with them, our freedom at all costs. Where in the Constitution does it say what type of firearms are allowed and what types are not allowed? Where does it say anything about background checks, red flag laws, waiting periods, or limits on how many firearms you can purchase in a 30-day period? The truth is, the Constitution doesn't say anything about these issues. What it says is, shall not be infringed. The Second Amendment, written in the 18th century, simply states, a well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms, shall not be infringed. This brevity and lack of specificity have led to endless debates and interpretations. No place in the Constitution is there a limit on the rights of the people. The Constitution does, however, limit the power of the government with terms like Congress shall make no laws and shall not be infringed. The government has never had the power to enact any restrictions on firearm ownership. The core principle of the Second Amendment is the protection of the individual's right to self-defense and the preservation of liberty against tyranny. This ambiguity forces us to reflect on the true meaning of these words and the intent of the Founding Fathers. As we navigate the complexities of modern society, we must remember that the ultimate goal is safeguard our freedoms for future generations. In the end, it is up to us, we the people, to interpret, defend, and preserve the rights enshrined in our Constitution. We must always remember that governments derive their just power from the consent of the governed. If the government continues to violate their oath of office and the Constitution, maybe it is time to revoke our consent to be governed. Stay frosty, friends. Keep your head down and your powder dry.